I am 73 years old, and I still remember the exact sound the kettle made the morning I realized my daughter had not called me in 11 days. Not a fight, not a falling out, just 11 days of silence that crept in like fog under a door. I stood in my kitchen in Harrowfield, the small town in the hills where I have lived for 31 years, and I listened to that kettle scream until it clicked off on its own. The tea went cold on the counter. I did not drink it. I was too busy replaying every conversation from the previous months, searching for the moment I had become optional. What I found was not one moment. It was 3 questions. 3 questions my daughter Thessaly had been asking me for years, and that I had been answering wrong every single time. They sounded caring. They sounded like love. They were not love. They were architecture. She was building something with those questions, brick by quiet brick, and I had been handing her the mortar with a smile on my face. I am going to tell you what those questions are. And I am going to tell you why everything you have been taught about how to answer them is accelerating the day you become a stranger in your own story. The truth I am about to share is going to sound harsh. It is going to sound at first like the advice of someone who does not believe in family. I want you to stay with me, because I believe in family more than I believe in almost anything else on this earth. That is exactly why I am telling you this. Everyone says the same thing. They say, stay available. They say, answer every call, attend every dinner, adjust your schedule, make yourself easy to reach, easy to please, easy to manage. They say that proximity is love, and that love is measured in accommodations. What nobody tells you is that when you make yourself completely frictionless, completely flexible, completely without edges, you do not become more loved. You become furniture. You become the lamp in the corner that nobody notices until it burns out. The cruel secret I discovered at 73, standing next to a cold cup of tea in a quiet house in Harrowfield, is this. The parent who is hardest to move is the parent who is hardest to lose. And the 3 innocent questions your children ask are the precise instruments they use, without malice, without even awareness, to find out how movable you are. Let me show you how I learned this. I was not always the woman who stood alone in her kitchen. There was a time when this house was layered with noise. Thessaly and her younger brother Orvan growing up in every room, marking the walls with heights in pencil, leaving muddy boots by the back step. My husband Calloway and I built something here that I was proud of. We were not wealthy people, but we were a whole people. Calloway passed when Thessaly was in her mid-20s. Orvan moved to the coast for work, and Thessaly, my eldest, stayed nearby. For a long time, that felt like grace. The first question started innocently enough. Thessaly would call, and at some point in the conversation she would ask, "Mom, are you still doing okay on your own up there?" It is a beautiful question, is it not? It sounds like concern. It sounds like a daughter leaning in. I answered it the way any mother would. I reassured her. I said, "Yes, of course, I am perfectly fine. Do not worry about me." And for years, that was the whole transaction. She asked. I reassured. She felt better. I felt grateful to be checked on. What I did not understand was what I was teaching her with that answer. Every time I said, "I am perfectly fine, do not worry," I was communicating something underneath the words. I was communicating, "Your concern is excessive." I was communicating, "I do not need much." I was communicating, "You are free to redirect your attention." I was, without knowing it, training her to worry less about me. And a daughter who worries less calls less, visits less, thinks of you less. Not because she loves you less, but because you told her 11 times a year for a decade that you required nothing. I should have answered differently. I should have said something true. I am managing, but there are days the house feels very large. That is all. Not a complaint, not a demand, just a window left open instead of nailed shut. But I was so afraid of being a burden that I made myself weightless, and weightless things drift. The second question came later, after Thessaly had married a man named Pruitt and had the grandchildren. She would call, usually on a Sunday, and somewhere in the conversation she would ask, "Mom, what do you think about us maybe looking at places for you closer to us? Just so you know your options." Again, it sounds like love. It sounds like planning, like forward thinking, like a family taking care of its own. I answered this one the same way I answered the first. I deflected. I said, "Oh, I am not ready for any of that. I love it here in Harrowfield. Let us not worry about it now." And Thessaly would say, "Okay, just wanted you to know the option is there." End of conversation. What I did not see was the assumption baked into the question itself. The question assumes that the decision about where I live belongs to a conversation that includes other people. It assumes that my home, my town, my 31 years of mornings and winters and particular light through the kitchen window is a variable to be optimized. And by deflecting instead of correcting, I was not holding my ground. I was delaying the surrender. Because every time I said, "Not right now," I was implying there would be a right now eventually. I was teaching her that this was a negotiation and that she just had not found the right moment to close it. I have a neighbor, Wentworth, who is 78. He answered that question differently than I did. He did not deflect. He said yes. He said yes because it seemed practical, because his daughter was persuasive, because he was tired of shoveling the path in winter. He moved to a smaller place near his daughter's house, and within 14 months, he told me, sitting on a bench in the small park near his new address, that he felt like a houseplant that had been repotted. Alive, he said, but not rooted, not the same. He spent his days waiting for visits that came once a week, if he was lucky, in a town where no one knew his name, or Calloway's name, or the name of the couple who had lived next door to him for 20 years. He had traded 30 years of identity for proximity to people who were, mostly, busy with their own lives. The last time I saw him, his eyes had a quality I can only describe as having the lights on, but not being home. I do not say this to be unkind to Wentworth or to his daughter. I say it because it is the truth that nobody speaks out loud at the family dinner table when these decisions are being made. The third question was the one that finally broke something open in me. This one came not from Thessaly's voice, but from her silence. Or rather, from a question she asked Orvin, which he relayed to me with the awkward loyalty of a younger sibling who did not want to be in the middle. She had asked him, "Do you think Mom would ever consider letting us have more say in how she manages things? Not take over, just, be more involved." She did not ask me directly. She asked around me. And that is when I finally understood the shape of what had been happening. These 3 questions, asked over years, were not individual inquiries. They were a sequence. First, establish that you might need help. Second, establish that your location is negotiable. Third, establish that your decisions should be collaborative. Taken together, they form a single argument, advanced incrementally, with love and concern as its currency. The argument is, you are declining, and declining people need to be managed. Thessaly was not doing this out of cruelty. She is not a cruel person. She is a frightened person who loves her mother and cannot tolerate the idea of something going wrong. But her fear, if I fed it, if I kept reassuring it and accommodating it and bending my life around it, would eventually consume the thing she was afraid of losing. Me. The version of me that is someone, that has a shape, that is not just a dependent variable in someone else's equation. So I did something that felt, at first, like the hardest thing I had ever done. I stopped making myself easy. I did not stop loving her. I did not pull back my warmth. But I stopped shrinking. I stopped deflecting. I stopped answering her questions from a place of managed reassurance and started answering them from a place of quiet, steady truth. When she asked me how I was doing on my own, I said, "Some mornings are long, but I like my long mornings. This is where I live, and I am living here well." I did not ask for her approval. I did not soften the edges for her comfort. I just stated it, the way you state a fact about geography. When the subject of moving came up again, I said something I had been rehearsing in my head for 3 months. I said, "Thessaly, I want to be clear with you because I love you and I think you deserve clarity. I am not moving from Harrowfield. Not now, not in 10 years, not unless I decide, with my own whole mind, that I want to. This is not a door I am leaving open. This is a decision." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, Mom." And the conversation moved on. And the conversation has never returned to that subject since. That was 14 months ago. In those 14 months, Thessaly has called more. Not less, more. She has visited twice with the grandchildren, which is twice more than she visited in all of the previous year. She texts me photographs of small things, her garden, a book she is reading, a meal Pruitt cooked that turned out wrong. She is, for the first time in years, sharing her ordinary life with me instead of auditing mine. The dynamic did not collapse when I held my ground. It reorganized around something more honest. Here is what I believe happened, and I want to say this carefully because it matters. When a parent is too yielding, too accommodating, too quick to say, "I am fine, do not worry," the child loses something without realizing it. They lose the experience of being held by someone stronger than their own anxiety. They lose the stabilizing force of a person who is not moved by every wind. And without that, they become the parent in the relationship. They start to carry the weight of managing you, and carrying that weight is exhausting. And exhausting relationships slowly, quietly, get rationed. You start to become the obligation instead of the anchor. When I stopped performing smallness, Thessaly stopped managing me. And when she stopped managing me, she could simply be with me again. I am not telling you to be cold to your children. I am not telling you that concern is a trap, or that love from your family is something to be suspicious of. What I am telling you is this. There is a version of available that becomes invisible, and there is a version of present that becomes a burden. And you can love your children deeply and fully, and still refuse to dissolve yourself into their comfort. You can answer the question, "Are you okay?" with something true instead of something soothing. You can answer the question, "Have you thought about your options?" with something that closes the door instead of leaving it ajar. You can answer the unasked question, the one whispered around you and not to you, by simply living in a way that makes it unnecessary. By being, at 70 or 80 or wherever you are on this road, the kind of person who does not need to be managed because they are clearly, quietly, unambiguously managing. There is a line I wrote in my journal the night after I told Thessaly the door was closed. I wrote it for myself, not for anyone else. I wrote, "The people who love you cannot be cured of their fear by your smallness, only by your steadiness." I have read that sentence probably 40 times since. I keep returning to it. My kettle still screams every morning. The tea still steams beside the window that looks out on the same hills it has looked out on for 31 years. Some mornings are long, but they are mine, entirely, unapologetically, peacefully mine. If you are sitting somewhere in a house that has gotten quieter, if you have been answering those 3 questions the way I answered them for years, I want you to know something. It is not too late to stop. It is not too late to offer something more solid than reassurance. It is not too late to become, in your children's eyes, not a problem they are carefully solving, but a person they are grateful to still know. The door is not closed on any of this. It is just waiting for you to walk through it differently. Thank you for sitting with me today. You did not have to stay, and you did. That means something to me. If this opened something in you, there is another conversation I would like to continue with you. On this screen right now, there is a video about the moment parents stop being parents and start becoming guests in their own family. It is the conversation nobody has at the right time. Come sit with me there too. Take care of yourself, whatever that means for you.